Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the content patch for the 21st of Feb 2014. My name is TotalBiscuit, with today's gaming news and comment. Coming up in the show, Irrational Games to close its doors and Respawn insulted by claims it was bribing the press over Titanfall. All this in the OC Remix track of the day is coming your way right about now. In what I have to imagine must be something of a surprise for most people, Irrational Games will be cutting down its staff to a team of 15 people, essentially closing its doors in its current form and rebooting as a smaller studio headed up by Ken Levine. That means that 180 jobs are scheduled to go at the developer, and Irrational are holding a recruitment day, which is being attended by a great many people indeed, to attempt to find new positions in other companies for those who are losing their jobs. Ken Levine posted a fairly lengthy open letter on the Irrational Games website, which indicated that he personally wished to create smaller, narratively focused but replayable games for a core audience. In order to do this, he claimed, he needed to refocus his energy on a smaller team with a flatter structure and a more direct relationship with gamers. The full open letter is available to read in the description below this video, and it does seem that there's a fairly high likelihood of these developers landing on their feet. The list of those attending the recruitment day on February the 26th in Boston is fairly large. It includes companies such as Crytek, BioWare, Retro Insomniac, Sledgehammer, Treyarch, and ArenaNet. So I have a feeling that most of them will come out of that okay. It's also entirely possible that some of the residual staff will be moved over to the former 2K Marin studio, which underwent staff reductions and then was merged into the new Bay Area 2K studio. If you don't already know, of course, 2K Marin was responsible for Bioshock 2, and to some degree, the original. A little bit of a weird story behind 2K Marin, actually. It was spun off of Irrational Games shortly after the release of Bioshock, and included a lot of the actual original Bioshock developers. The main problem with that studio right now is that, one, it hasn't actually developed anything. The last thing that 2K Marin made before this whole folding thing occurred was Bureau XCOM Declassified, which was not even close to being successful, and was supposed to be headed up by Rod Ferguson, the ex-director of production at Epic Games, and of course the former VP of development at Irrational. Unfortunately, he's run off to go and do Gears of War with Microsoft now, so we don't really know what's going on with that. Now, of course, there has been a statement directly from 2K suggesting that, of course, Bioshock will continue. In a statement given to Joystick, they said, Bioshock is one of our most beloved and critically acclaimed franchises, and we are indebted to Ken and the talented team at Irrational Games for their contributions to the series with Bioshock and Bioshock Infinite, the latter being one of the most decorated games of 2013. The Bioshock universe remains a rich creative canvas for many untold stories, and we look forward to exploring the next Bioshock experience. So it does seem most likely that they'd make use of that Bay Area studio and push on with Bioshock from there. This is a really strange and fairly unexpected situation, I think, and the reason is that that was an incredibly successful game and an incredibly successful studio. So for it to just go kaput like that is really odd. That's the kind of thing that you usually see from studios that have had several failed games. Irrational, of course, has not. They're extremely well funded, and the sales of Bioshock Infinite were exceptionally good. If you were to take that open letter at face value, what you'd see is Ken Levine coming out and saying, you know what? I don't want to do this anymore, so you guys go away, and we're going to make some smaller games with a smaller team and refocus everything. Which doesn't make a huge amount of sense, because the most sensible thing, you would think, in that situation, is for Ken Levine to create another studio, take the staff that he wants to go and do that, fill in the missing spaces in Irrational, put a new project head on Bioshock, and continue making Bioshock. That, you would think, would make the most sense. However, one has to wonder if that would be a good idea, and I want to know exactly how much influence 2K and Take-Two actually had in this particular decision, because it seems to me the publisher must have had a say in this. There's no way. The way that I envision it going down, and this is purely speculation, so taken as nothing more than that, is Ken Levine approaches 2K and says, look, I'm done with this, I want to go create a new studio, and eventually they haggle him down to saying, no, we need to keep that brand, we need to keep the name Irrational, we need to keep you heading it up, pick your best guys, and we'll get rid of the rest, we'll fold some of them into the Bay studio, do Bioshock from there. And I have to wonder if that's the best way of doing it, but essentially it does the same thing. I mean, if he takes the best and brightest from Irrational to another studio, then Irrational really isn't Irrational anymore, is it? Is Irrational Irrational without Ken Levine? I would say so, because I mean, Epic Games is still Epic Games without Cliffy B. Yeah, absolutely, it is still the same company, but if you take a lot of the head talent away, then you are left with certainly a talented developer, but without leadership, without direction. And I have a feeling that that could work out pretty badly. There are, of course, other possibilities, some more sordid. Indeed, Lee Alexander wrote an article on Gama Sutra recently saying that she believed that all was not well inside Irrational Games and hadn't been for quite some time. We, again, have no idea just how legitimate that is. But I've got to say that the decision does seem a little strange, and as a direct result, people are, of course, speculating as to the reason why this has occurred the way that it has. The question is, what does it mean for us as gamers? Because people losing their jobs is sad. It's likely that a lot of these guys are going to land on their feet by the looks of it, so that's okay. But what does it mean for those who like Bioshock? Well, Bioshock is obviously going to continue. There's no question about that, and it would not in any way surprise me if it was that Bay Area studio that took it up. And to be fair, you should be fairly happy about that, assuming that there's enough of the Bioshock 2 developers left in there. I've said it many times before and people have shouted at me, but I do believe Bioshock 2 was the best Bioshock. I know, you might be saying, well, what the hell is wrong with you? Why would you believe that? Nobody believes you. Well, it had the best mechanics. It's as simple as that. It had the best gunplay, it had the most polished and most in-depth mechanics of the series, and frankly, Minerva's Den was a phenomenal piece of DLC. So, in that respect, I believe that it was actually the best Bioshock game. Was it the best looking? Was it the most imaginative? No, of course it wasn't. But it was the best one to play. It was the strongest mechanically. If enough of the original guys are left in that Bay Area studio, then I would expect that the next Bioshock is probably going to be pretty good. It might even be better than Infinite, assuming they decide to focus on the mechanics this time around, rather than spending all their time on world building. Hey, maybe we go back into the future and we do Bioshock System Shock. Who the hell knows? I don't necessarily know if I'd want them to do that, though. System Shock 2 is incredible. I don't know if I'd want to ruin the memory of that. But aside from that, what about Ken Levine's new studio? What about the games he's making? Well, what he's saying is he wants to create narratively focused games that have high replayability. Now, that's a fairly large departure from what they were doing with Bioshock Infinite, which is a narratively focused game that is highly unreplayable, as in there is no reason to play it again. Everything plays out the exact same way regardless of what happens. Indeed, it's less replayable than something like Bioshock 1 or 2 would be. So, for him to say, we want to make narratively focused games that focus on replayability, I like that idea. And that indicates to me that we're talking about games that actually have mutually exclusive choices. And it seems, perhaps, that they're even going down the Telltale route there. That's pretty cool. I mean, this is something that I intensely disliked about Bioshock Infinite. It was very much a narrative that you had no control over, you could not change in any way. And the fact that it was, as a result, completely unreplayable meant that, to me, it wasn't a particularly good value proposition. What I'd absolutely love to see from that studio are 2 to 3 hour games that bear repeating multiple times. I think that's an absolutely fantastic model for a game. It's ideal for me because I don't have the time to sit down and rack up 10 to 15 to 20 hours on one game when I've got so many other games to do. So I would love to be able to finish one in 3 hours, and if I liked it enough, play it again and do different things and have different outcomes occur. So it sounds good to me. Some people are going to be very disappointed. A lot of people are going to be very disappointed. They wanted to see another Bioshock game from the same studio, but they're going to get another Bioshock game. The question is whether or not it will end up being any good. I have no doubt that the folks over at 2K will absolutely make another Bioshock. They would be suicidal not to. But as we're seeing with franchises like that, more often than not, you can end up in a situation where the franchise just sort of peters out and dies after several poorer games. Perhaps it would make more sense to end on a high point, but we know that's not what the games industry is right now, so I would certainly expect more Bioshock games. Well, best of luck to the developers. Hopefully they all find themselves in good places, and we'll see what the future of the franchise holds once 2K deigns to tell us. And finally, a producer over at Respawn Entertainment, Drew McCoy, took to NeoGAF to respond to allegations and cynicism surrounding Titanfall and claims indeed that Respawn was bribing the press. His response was short and to the point, claiming that anyone who thinks we aren't living in the shadow of decade-plus-old established franchises at our reveal at E3 are as crazy as the conspiracy theories of anyone getting paid off. We've had to fight tooth and nail to have a game that anyone would even know existed, let alone be excited for and want to create coverage of. I get it that it's not for everyone, but to say we're paying anyone off is downright insanity, not to mention the height of insulting. Well, half of me says don't even bother responding to crap on NeoGAF, or Reddit, or any other forum. And then immediately people will rightly pick up the fact that I do that. So, it's difficult. It very much is quite tricky to resist the urge to respond to this kind of stuff. And allegations of bribery and payola, essentially, within the games industry have been rife for a very, very long time. And they've come again into sharp focus as a result of the recent Xbox and Machinima bust-up involving undisclosed promotion for the Xbox One. There are always going to be conspiracy theories, and there are always going to be uninformed people spouting nonsense, and that's prevalent on pretty much every forum. NeoGAF is a bit more reputable because a lot of devs post there, and some of the more high-profile leaks have also been posted to that forum, but it's still pretty bad when it comes to people just spouting ignorance, coming up with whatever the hell they please, having really no industry knowledge, and claiming to be experts by proximity, merely posting in the same thread as a dev apparently makes you a dev in the minds of some of the worst posters on pretty much any forum. But there is always a kernel of truth behind all of that nonsense. Every conspiracy does have to start from somewhere, and frankly, it would not in any way surprise me if bribery has occurred in the past. In fact, I know for a fact it has. I mean, there's not even a question about that. It is well known within the industry that bribery has occurred in many ways. It might not have been directly with cash in most circumstances, but it has definitely happened when it comes to pampering journalists and putting on ridiculous parties and all sorts of things like that. It does happen. And now we're in an era where the enthusiast press is dominant. Very much so. Traditional media sources have been shoved to the side when it comes to games coverage, and the most popular games coverage is now coming from people that post primarily to YouTube. It's really as simple as that. Even IGN has focused on YouTube as a place to post its video reviews, and that's where it gets most of its views for its video reviews. Even Giant Bomb, that focuses on their website and hosts all their videos there, will still put it on YouTube because it's important to have a presence there. The problem with enthusiast press is the word enthusiast. Really, you cannot go into an event being super hyped because the coverage that you will provide is most likely then going to be biased and untrue. There's so much of this, and honestly, I could claim that it's YouTubers' fault, and I certainly do believe that YouTubers are more susceptible to this kind of stuff, particularly if they're inexperienced, and they're also susceptible to being bought. By bought, I'm talking about undisclosed positive opinions. I'm not talking about getting involved in some paid-for event that's very clearly explained and disclosed. I don't have a problem with that, but I do have a problem with all of that stuff going undisclosed, and it's still occurring. You know, even after the whole Machinima blow-up, it is still occurring. I've seen so many examples of it, and it's really starting to get on my nerves. But it isn't just YouTubers at all. You know, I would like to talk about IGN in particular. I believe that IGN is by far the worst when it comes to hyping games. It is not your job as a press outlet to hype a product. That's the job of the PR guys. That's the job of the game's marketing team. You're supposed to be a press outlet. You're supposed to be impartial and give the consumer accurate information, which I cannot personally ever trust you to do if you've got weeks and weeks of hype leading up to a product. And there's been so many instances of IGN getting weeks worth of exclusives, getting interviews, and getting, of course, reviews out before anyone else, because before that, they've had weeks of hype coverage leading up to it. Now, are you telling me that you think there's not a deal going on there? There's obviously a deal going on there. They are, as a matter of course, and have been for years now, acting as a marketing arm for certain big publishers and developers. And as far as I'm concerned, they should not be doing that. No one that calls themselves press should be doing that. The problem is, with enthusiast press, the lines are very blurry indeed, especially when you're talking about YouTubers. But with IGN, you would expect coverage. IGN does unboxings, for God's sake. I mean, that's an absurd thing indeed. That's basically a piece of free marketing material. It's not critical in any way. You can't assess anything from taking something out of a box. But IGN has been doing unboxings over and over again. Unboxing the collector's edition of Lightning Returns, for God's sake. And how is that anything other than a piece of free marketing material? And more to the point, you'd have to then be suspicious of whether or not that is paid for, or at least traded for goodwill and favors. Heading on over to IGN's site right now, I see an article here that says why Lord of the Rings fans should be excited for Shadow of Mordor. What are you? You're supposed to be then reviewing this game, yeah? and you're putting out hype pieces telling people to be excited. This is why you should be excited. No, you shouldn't be excited. You should be looking at this through a critical eye, with a degree of cynicism, because Lord knows the industry has certainly given you good reason to be cynical about it. I don't even think that YouTubers who don't even call themselves press should be doing hype pieces like this. I mean, for one, it's terrible business sense. What you're basically saying to a company is, yeah, we'll hype your product for free and we're very easily bought off by trinkets and promises. There are plenty of YouTubers as well as more traditional outlets that get sent these sort of press gift bags of some description before a game comes out, and they're usually full of fun marketing materials of some description. And what the publisher's marketing team is looking for from you there is, one, for you to actually show this marketing material to the audience because they've created a free ad by doing that, and two, for you to be grateful for it. Because if you are grateful for something that a publisher's done for you, you are likely to soften your attitude to whatever product comes your way. So I have to ask, is anyone actually surprised that these accusations are coming out? I don't necessarily agree with the Respawn dev here. Actually, I think his statement is pretty nonsensical. Saying that he has to fight tooth and nail to have a game that anyone would even know existed is absolute nonsense. I mean, the name value alone of the people that ended up at Respawn, the fact that these guys worked on the most successful Call of Duty titles of all time, the fact that this is their first game, the fact that it is the first big Xbox One release, it's backed by millions of dollars of EA and Microsoft marketing budgets. They did not at all have to fight tooth and nail to let people know it existed. Titanfall, at least from a marketing perspective, is already successful. But I certainly don't think that they went out of their way to go and bribe journalists. I think that's nonsense, and the quality of that game speaks for itself. Even playing the limited beta, you can say, yeah, this is a polished product with an obvious and solid vision, and some really nice mechanics that we generally don't see. So I think the accusations of bribery, considering this particular title, are pretty ridiculous. But I don't believe that accusing outlets or indeed publishers of bribery or trying to influence scores is unfair. Because that's happened, it will continue to happen, and when it comes to gaming press in general, we have let ourselves be completely open and vulnerable to that kind of thing, because we are the enthusiast press, and enthusiasts are far too easy to exploit. They get way too excited way too quickly. And as far as I'm concerned, anyone that labels themselves a journalist, a reviewer, or a critic should never, ever, ever be getting hyped up for a release. That is doing a disservice to the people that are watching you. They are relying on you for a solid and unbiased opinion, which you cannot give if you're going to write articles like why Lord of the Rings fans should be excited for Shadow of Mordor, a game you haven't played yet and is nowhere near release. Alright folks, that wraps me up. Thank you very much for watching the content patch, but before I go, I'd like to give you the OC Remix track of the day. Chrono Trigger is one of the more popular tracks to remix over on ocremix.org for fairly obvious reasons. It had a great soundtrack, and it's one of those older titles that you could really do an awful lot with. The latest remix, hot off the presses as of the 18th of Feb, is by AeroZ, and it's of the tracks Corridor of Time and Secret of the Forest. Very much a chiptune style to this one, which I know a lot of you very much like. And the name of the track is Echoes of the Forest. You can download it for free in the description below this video, and I'll see you next time.